Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you. What a great crowd. Thanks for coming to the meetup. If you haven't already signed up, you can find us here. QR code is my LinkedIn. I usually share the meetup information on LinkedIn as well and share additional information. This is the first one this year, and that's just due to my lack of not liking the cold and not wanting to come outside in January and February. But send a message through the meetup platform if there's a topic you're interested in, if you want to present something. Again, this is community-based. It's hosted here at Worldwide Technology, but it's not a Worldwide Technology event or commercial or anything like that. So it doesn't matter if it's somebody that's even direct competition, whatever, I'm happy to bring them in and have them present. So let me know. Again, it's supposed to be community-driven, so your input is extremely valuable. Looks like everybody found the drinks in the refrigerator outside, pizza in the hallway, and lots of swag today. And then the restrooms, most importantly, are out the door and almost straight across. So you can get in and out that way. Questions about logistics? All right. So today we have Jason Rutherford, and Jason's going to talk to us about ReconAI. Yes. Jason is a managing partner at Model Technologies, and they're the sponsor today, provided lunch for you. We are going to record the session, so at the end we'll do Q&A, but we have a couple microphones. I think Steve and I will come around with the microphones. We want to make sure we capture the questions, but don't be shy. And I feel like I'm forgetting something I usually do. I probably should make notes. Future topics, we'll talk about at the end, but I'll turn it over to Jason now if you're ready.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, thank you.
I am. I'd like to give Steve a round of applause for organizing this and putting it together. So that's Steve Bowman. He's Vice President of Sales. Can you guys hear me okay? Is that coming through all right? Everybody good? Okay. So my name is Jason Rutherford. I'm the managing partner and co-founder of Model Technology Solutions. Model was started in 2014. And I know Bill said this user group's not necessarily going to sound like a product pitch or try to sell you something, but it's going to very much probably sound like that. But what I'm looking for is really good interaction and questions about AI. I've done a lot of AI work over the last 2 years. So I've been in IT for 25 years now. I know I look really young to be in IT that long, but that's how long I've been in. I'm married, 2 kids, and my dog would be upset if I didn't mention that I also had a chocolate lab. Some relevant background here. So scripting guy at heart. I have a device management background. Did a lot in identity and security over the years. I was technical editor of a book a long, long time ago, contributor on a white paper in 2017 from Microsoft. So run the gamut of kind of those 4 areas of specialty. The owner of CrossFit St. Charles. Anybody do CrossFit in here? I know you do. Yeah. If you want to talk about CrossFit, I'm always happy to talk about CrossFit. You knew that was coming, Steve. And then through my contact info, where you can find, you can send me an email or visit our website if you want more information. So I'm going to talk about 2 products. I should probably also note I'm dealing with an injury, so I'm going to sit down for this. I'll be sitting most of the time. I'm going to talk about 2 products today. Both of them use AI in some capacity. And I know on the agenda there was only 1 product on the list, ReconAI, but in the last 3 weeks I've made significant advancements in my agentic AI framework, so I want to talk about that a little bit too. So I like to start with a problem statement. So we have a lot of devices under management at Model, and a big challenge that we have is jumping between portals, and you and your staff might feel this burden too. Does everyone like how many portals they have to go to manage their devices? I see a lot of yeses. Right. So a couple of the portals just to list. If you're a Microsoft shop, we're going to be Entra ID, Intune, Defender, Azure Portal, Log Analytics, Admin Center. There's just a lot, right? And each one has their own kind of specialty. And it's a lot of times what you have to do is correlate data between those portals to really triage and troubleshoot what's going on in an environment. So ReconAI was originally written as an internal tool for Model for our managed services. We saw a lot of value in bringing this out as an external tool that customers could purchase. It's free to all of our managed services customers because we need it probably just as much as our customers need it. But essentially, the high level is it's a kind of a single pane of glass across all those different API endpoints, right? So you get all the data, and I threw one screenshot in there, not that that's going to do it any justice of what actually you can see in the product. So I'm planning on spending more time in demo. I typically don't like doing slides, but I felt like that was important to kind of set the stage. So you have a lot of critical metrics, and a lot of the data that I pulled in there, I put in there aggregates, goals, things like that, so you don't have to actually think beyond just looking at the portal, and there's exports built in everywhere. So a couple of the product highlights that I think are worth noting that are in there. There's a logins page that's got an interactive map. So if you're familiar with Log Analytics and Entra ID, right? You get every login, you get every failure, you get every IP address, you get every country, every location. Does anybody go to Log Analytics daily and look at that information? No. Does anybody know how many failed logins they have in their tenant today? Like right now? Oh, Kevin knows. Hey, Kevin. Kevin Sullivan, we have a celebrity among us. So this map essentially gives you a plot point of all the failed logins, successful logins, repeated attempts. And what I've found by putting our customers' tenants in there is there's holes in conditional access policies, right? There's brute force password spray attacks all day long happening that can be prevented. And I never saw that clarity without a tool like this. So I'm going to make my way down this list. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on each one, but user device analytics is kind of a given. The Entra app registrations, so that's how services work, applications work in our Entra from a very high level. A lot of times those secrets or certificates will expire, and how do we find out? We get a call, right? What's that? Yeah, when things don't work anymore. That's typically what we learn is, oh, then you go investigate, and it takes you 15, 20 minutes to PIM up and get into Entra and all of this. That page that I built, I put in there expiring secrets within 30 days, expiring certificates within 30 days. I found devices and compliance to be a little cumbersome in Intune to troubleshoot and triage what's not compliant on policies, so I made that easier. Software inventory, a search, and export. I found that that was a little cumbersome to navigate in Intune and get really clean lists out of. Licensing, that was an interesting one. So anybody have a really good view of their licensing by go to Admin Center or portal.azure, right? It's cumbersome at best. And you should take a count on how many times I use the word cumbersome. Things like SharePoint and OneDrive insights. How many active OneDrive sites do you have? How many SharePoint sites, which are utilization, storage on the SharePoint sites, which ones are almost out of storage versus somebody calling and saying that, hey, I'm out of storage when they hit the limit? Because a lot of these things, they offer emails and notifications, but in my years of doing monitoring, I found that that turns into white noise all too often, right? How many people set up rules so that all their SharePoint notifications go to the SharePoint folder in their subfolder of their inbox? Yeah, I see a hand. So then we have Azure resources and cost management. Things like SKUs and cost per resource group. Some of that you can get out of the cost resource management out of Azure, but it's not clean. And then if you have multiple subscriptions, which I'm sure some of us do, you can't see an aggregate across those subscriptions of how much your total Azure spend actually is in your environment. And so solve that with this. Now, one of the last things I put in there was the on-premise collection, which is pretty interesting how it works. I'll talk about it just briefly. But having a dashboard of DC Diag, DNS replication, DNS health, all your critical domain functionality, because a lot of us are still hybrid. And if you still use MECM or SMS or SCCM, whatever you want to call it, getting insights into that, because that's kind of your control center for how your end users are getting applications and things. Essentially, we have a giant PowerShell scripts that run on those servers. They write to JSON files, right? Those JSON files get stored in Azure data, Azure storage accounts, blob storage. And then ReconAI links to that Azure storage and renders those JSON files. So at our customers, we have DC Diag running sometimes twice a day when we're triaging replication or issues with logins or policies applying. Now, why am I talking about this at an AI user group? So one of the last things I did is I wrote agentic AI tools into the product. So meaning if you have an LLM that can use tools like 4.1 Mini as an example, I think was one of the early ones, if I'm not mistaken. When you integrate with an LLM and ask it a question, now you can ask free questions about your data estate. What machines don't meet this compliance policy, right? What version of SQL is running on my SCCM and is it up to date? And that tool gets called pulling your data estate in a secure fashion because it's all landed in Azure AI Foundry, okay? Which means it's not going to backtrain models and it's going to stay in your tenant. Everything stays in your tenant. The cool thing about this app too that I thought was pretty interesting is that it doesn't store any of this data. So when you click the Devices tab, it pulls the Graph API real time. If you go delete a machine and you hit refresh, you see the machine's gone. Your count goes down, right? So there's no waiting for anything in that nature. Any questions on that? And I'll show that when I get to the demo portion. Some notes about security, because we do have access to your entire data estate, so this is really important. We hired a third-party security company to pen test the app, try to obfuscate data, try to get data. We gave them admin permissions, and it's locked up pretty solid. They were pretty impressed with it. It uses Entra ID credentials, OpenID, right? So just the same way you would auth using, when you see the little selection box on a login screen that says log in with your Microsoft account, right? That's how we do that. It is a multi-tenant Azure static web app behind a web application gateway living in my tenant. And it's got all the monitoring bells and whistles you can imagine on it. And what's needed from your side is an Entra App ID registration, a tenant ID, and a secret. And all the permissions are read-only. So that's an important step, that this doesn't take any action, and I'm going to say yet because there's stuff coming. But currently, it doesn't take any action. It's a read-only, consumption-only dashboard with AI built in. Any of the AI, or if you're doing caching, as an example, when you look for software inventory in Intune, it queries the device and then it runs another API query. Well, that can take some time if you want to render a whole software list in your entire estate. So we can cache that to Azure Tables, but it can be in your tenant. So you create the Azure storage account, you give me the SaaS URL token, I plug it into Recon, it syncs from Graph and lines it in your Azure environment, and then when you go render the page, it pulls it from your Azure. So all PII, PHI data, no concerns with that, it lives inside of your tenant, your control. Okay, so this is my newest adventure. This is product number 2. It's a little harder to explain. Is anybody familiar with agentic AI frameworks and autonomous agents? We have a couple of hands, right? So, and the biggest one that I've heard about most recently is probably OpenClaw, right? Has anybody played with OpenClaw? No? It's incredibly complex, right? I have an OpenClaw agent running in an Azure virtual server that's got a VPN that's locked down, containerized in Docker, and I'm still worried about security, okay? So what I built was, I was trying to build an OpenClaw instance for a personal assistant for me. I get 600 emails a day, and those emails largely need to be filtered out and triaged, right? And so my plan was to do this with OpenClaw, and I'll get into the framework here in just a minute. But what I realized is they didn't write it for an enterprise. They didn't write it for a Microsoft tenant. You have things like Telegram connectors. You have things like Google connectors. You have other APIs, but that's not anything that a business can really hang their hat on in an enterprise environment from a Microsoft shop. So then I spent time writing skills for OpenClaw, trying to get it to do Graph API things. At this point, I'd consider myself an expert at Graph. And I'm like, I'll just write the OpenClaw skills for this. That was painful. And then the security around it was a nightmare. So I built Workforce AI Studio. The name's, it's in the works. It's in beta, right? I've only got one agent running on it, but it's cool enough to share at this point. So I like to start with the problem statement again, right? So the problem statement is teams are losing a lot of hours that humans shouldn't necessarily have to do. And I'll use my example of like triaging inboxes, scheduling follow-ups, reminding me that emails need to be responded to, summarizing threads, researching things on a daily basis, right? And that's just one example. To preview what I'm going to eventually build is I'm going to build it to accept data from Recon so that I can build an agent to actually do some work to solve some of the security problems in tenants, right? We're not there yet, just full transparency. So it is AI tools. The frameworks exist. There's a lot of them. I know, I was reading an article yesterday, and there's about 10 of them listed, but they all work the exact same as OpenClaw, just trying to have a different skin on it. They're fragmented at best. They're ungoverned. If you've ever been into the marketplace to try to get a skill from OpenClaw, oh my gosh, how do you tell what the bill of materials, meaning where is this data coming from and where is this data going, and how do I know it's safe to put in an enterprise, right? That's almost impossible inside of those open source tools to some degree. It's incredibly difficult to scale, even if you automate it and build your Docker files and all those things, right? And I used OpenClaw as an example because I figured most people had heard about that. Workforce Studio is a centralized hub for I'm reading directly off the slide here, for deploying, managing, and governing AI agents alongside your team. So I natively wrote it with Teams bot capabilities. So and when I get to the demo, you'll see Janice Smith as my assistant. It looks like a person, and when I message her, she messages me back, and she uses all her memories and her scheduled tasks and everything she knows so that I have a fully autonomized agent to do things with. The tool set she has available to her are all Graph API driven, so she can move my emails around, she can schedule meetings for me, she can reply to meetings. I'll show you an email she sent me last night at 3 in the morning because she was working, I wasn't. So the agents don't just answer, they can act. And as an example, the exact example I think I just gave, she takes care of my emails, she moves files in the right place, makes sure things are where they should be, schedules tasks, she processes image, and it's all done through just a Teams chat, right? Because that's the interface I chose with it. And I put governance controls over it, so Steve tries to Teams chat Janice. She's like, you're not allowed to tell me what to do, right? And so I should program her to say that. So, by programming her, I'll just tell her in Teams, if Steve messages you, say this. Some slideware here. So role-based access is in place, full audit and logging capability of every chat conversation, every activity, every task, token consumption that the LM's using. I'm putting in, that are currently not there today, policy guardrails for order of operations, and then I have an approvals tab for things that we would consider sensitive that you would mark in the agent. She can't do unless she gets an approval. So this is a message she sent me yesterday at 4:49. She asked me, she's like, hey, good evening, just checking in. Is there anything you need before you wrap up for the day, right? She's just seeing if I need her to do anything. So I think my response was triage my inbox before I leave. And she just took care of it, right? I woke up this morning with the cleanest inbox I've ever had in my life. A couple points to note, they're always on. They're always learning and writing to memory. They can be scheduled. They're not necessarily manual triggers, but I did build in manual triggers if you want to trigger something that they can do on a regular basis. The fun part, architecture. That's hard to see on mine. So at the top left, a user will send a message in a Teams chat, right? A Teams chat, but it's a Teams bot. If you ever play with bot services from Azure, you can make the picture or the icon look like a person. So mine looks like a person. She made an image of what she thinks she looks like based on her description. And I put it as a profile pic. So message is the bot service. That bot service is configured to reach out to a webhook. That webhook lives in my my Azure static web app. That's where the system prompting, whatever that says, authority, tool usage, all of that stuff gets compiled, aggregated, put together, and sent over to Azure AI Foundry for retrieval from Azure Storage, Microsoft Graph, Azure Key Vault, and then back into the Teams API. So that's exactly how she works. Let's see here, which one's this? Compute and data. So we have an Azure Static Web App, an Entra ID using OpenID Connect. So it's only, you can limit it down based on their Azure credentials. A bot registration, Azure Functions, Azure Table Storage, Azure Queue Storage, AI Foundry, Key Vault, and app configuration is what it takes. Now to get it up and running, it is literally a GitHub repo that you clone and then Azure up the service, and it's configuring variables at that point. So some system prompt assembly. So we have an identity, authority, memory, tasks, tools. This is really hard to read. I should have made that bigger. What's that last one say? Policies, thank you. And that puts it together into a system prompt and sends it out to Azure AI Foundry. So every time she gets a list of instructions of who she is, what she does, how she knows things, and it's literally just an endpoint hanging out there in Azure. So you can have multiple agents using the same endpoint because there's no memory tied to that endpoint in Azure AI. It's all in the static web app that compiles it and sends it based on the bot ID, right? The way I limit permissions inside of Azure for that is I use access policies in Exchange. So that bot identity is registered as an app registration. And then I give it rights to create, move, email, read email, all those things. But then I limited it down to just my account that she has rights to. So if I told her to go move Steve's email, the Exchange access policy would not let her, right? And that's just not possible inside of Azure, inside of like OpenClaw today. We did have to use a logic app to build this for the schedule API, because if you're familiar with Azure Static Web Apps, there's no scheduling service or cron service, which is just mind-blowing to me. All I need is a timer. And so I had to write an API that is triggered by literally a key and a webhook. And then it uses, again, table storage, and then does its work back in Azure AI Foundry. Some things to note here. I did put the Foundry key, the keys, the API keys. I put those in Key Vault. If you run OpenClaw, you will find that they store them locally on files on the root of the C drive or the root of the environment drive. So if that gets compromised, all your APIs, all your keys natively are just gone. In fact, there was a leak, I don't know, a couple weeks ago where there's an open vulnerability on OpenClaw, and it, I think they leaked something like, I don't know, 10,000 API keys and endpoints. So if you want to see your costs go up. Some model routing here. So currently I've got Anthropic's Claude built in, the 4.6 Sonnet, and I've got GPT. Each of one of those models use a little bit of a different API call, so I have to code all of those. And it's probably worth noting, both of these apps, one that has been pen tested and I have customers on today, and this new one I'm building, was written with AI. I don't know coding. It's probably worth noting. Okay. Questions before I go over to my demo?
So you vibe coded pretty much all of that?
All of it. Now, what I will say is I did have to actually go in the GitHub repo from time to time and actually look at code because I just couldn't figure out what it was doing. And I had to take it block by block. But again, I have a scripting. I tried. I have so many LLMs. Yeah.
Have you considered integrating with OpenRouter?
Oh, for the model routing? To choose model, which models?
One integration.
So the problem is I'm trying to keep everything in the Azure tenant. So is the do they have that in Azure?
No, it's outside.
Yeah, I think that's an outside service. Kevin's going to look for us. Kevin's a Microsoft guy. Now it's out of the bag, Kevin. Now everybody knows.
Have model routing, right?
Yes.
I don't know if you're referring to something else of what's outside, but.
Yes. So the idea was to provide as much flexibility and parameters that I could, right? And I don't know about Workforce Studio for when you configure AI inside of Recon, it only takes Azure AI Foundry endpoints. So you've got to set it up in AI Foundry, but from a model perspective, you can deploy 4.6 Sonnet, or you can deploy GPT, whatever. I've tried 4 or 5 different models, and as long as it's got tool calling capability, it works just fine.
Something like Amazon Bedrock.
Yeah, whatever models are available in Azure is what are available to us,
Okay,
right?
just in Azure.
So they have a ton of models of it. Kimi, they have Grok, they have Anthropic, GPT, right? The goal was to keep everything in the Azure tenant from a security and data estate perspective.
Are you utilizing all the transforms that are within inside the LLM of Azure to make sure that no PII or PHI?
Yes, so you can use like those policy guardrails.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
You didn't have to write your own transforms?
No.
And you're not a developer by trade. You're more of a script kiddie.
Yeah, so does anybody remember the scripting guy from Microsoft? He did 1 year of training, but when he was first at Microsoft, and I was lucky enough to be put in his class. And so that's who taught me how to script. So I'm pretty proficient at scripting, but I'm not a developer, no.
I'm not an expert in the space. I try and be an astute observer, so I hope this aligns with everything. You were talking about chasing after the secrets and certifications and permit and stuff like that. A lot, you also mentioned that you're working in the agentic area too, where you've got agents operating between people and I suppose each other at some levels. So I kind of have two questions. One is, do you find that the compliance for that type of traffic is for the most part in order in terms of function and permitting, or is that an issue still with tooling and agents and software getting into the space without tripping on itself? And I'm just wondering how brittle or resilient you feel that is at this time.
These are great questions. So I will tell you, I was just telling Steve when we were in the parking lot about the pain that I went through the last couple of days. And I'll give you a small example. Hopefully this aligns with what you're asking.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I forgot to ask the ephemerality issue too, because some of those permits and things are very quick.
Yeah. So the agents, I'd like to say they don't hallucinate and they behave on their own very frequently. I still think there's a lot of work to do there. But what you can do is you can guardrail and prompt engineer and prompt firewall around them all day. It's not perfect, but it's gotten a lot better. I was actually telling Steve a story that might coincide with this example. I have an assistant named Janice Smith. Janice Smith is an AI bot that I created. She runs Sonnet 4.6. She runs in my Workforce Studio. It's all in Azure. It's all in Key Vault. Everything's kind of safe and secure. I had Janice create a subfolder in my inbox. I said, hey, you're not allowed to delete anything. I didn't actually write a tool to delete emails from Graph, just move, right? And so I said, I want all of the emails to be moved to the _Janice folder when you do your triage inbox cleanup. Because, I mean, my role, having an AI agent have full access to my inbox is funny. When I was wiring it up, I was a little nervous. But I'm like, I wrote the whole thing. Why would I be nervous? I know exactly what it does, right? And so I got a message one afternoon. She's like, I could not find the _Jana folder. I'm like, Jana? Like, that was never even in instructions or the memory. So I immediately took the snapshot, went to the logs, grabbed the logs to the LLM, and fed it back into my vibe coding, right? And said, how does this happen, right? The folder is clearly Janice, and she's been doing it for days. Where did she come up with Jana, right? And so more strict policy guardrails in the composition of the actual instructions to the LLM so far have gotten me there. But so if that helps answer your question, there's still a lot of those kinds of nuances that exist.
Questions?
It's probably worth noting too that the pace that development is happening and the improvements and the change of everything, I feel like I'm in a dead sprint every day, right? Trying to get this stuff to be useful for the enterprise and to work and function correctly. And the changes I've seen just in the last 2 years is insane. Yeah.
What's your preferred vibe coding tool and what differences are you seeing? Clearly dropping things into the different tools give you clearly different paths and outcomes. Kind of walk us down that path of...
So early on, I found Lovable, if you've played with Lovable. I like a lot of things about Lovable. Number one, I live primarily in the Microsoft world, right? So when you fire up an Azure Static Web App, you can hook it to a GitHub repo, put your YAML together, and deploy it. So here's the process that I use. Lovable, I hook to a GitHub repo and vibe code and do my testing. But because it's behind Azure Authentication, none of the preview tools work, none of the rendering works in the app. So I automatically create the YAML inside of the Azure environment. So every time a code changes, I change the YAML so that anytime code changes to rebuild. So when I make a change, if I make a change to Recon right now, all the tenants get it right now, right? Now I can change that and create a dev, a stage environment. But I found Lovable, and then I use Claude Code for a lot of the checks and safety inspections and a security, pass-through, those kinds of things. So those are the two I primarily stay in.
You still have to kind of drop back and forth between the two.
I'd say 90% of my work is done in Lovable, and then all the testing is in a production or a development static web app that's automatically deployed every change.
Great, thank you.
You said you're pretty broad on some of this. Are you going to like put into like a user acceptance area or something like that, or?
Recon is in prod. We have,
Recon is? Okay.
yeah, we have customers running it. It's been security tested by a third-party company. We have gateways in front. We have all sorts of monitoring on it. So that one does have a development environment.
So you're basically utilizing the CI/CD pipeline to do it, where it's
Yeah.
going through the pre-prod and then user acceptance and.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right. And so that was actually the white paper I worked on in 2017 was
Okay.
the CI/CD pipeline.
So, and for the old guy here, do you not see this as just like basically event correlation with some AI tied around it?
AI what?
Like taking event correlation and then just tying like machine learning behind it? Is that
That's
not what this basically
essentially
is?
what it is, but the lens for Recon specifically, right? Let's leave workforce out of this for now. For Recon specifically, having 25 years as an engineer and troubleshooting and triage, I can mold it and train it and tell the AI exactly what we're looking for in a lot of these areas. So I think that that's a little bit different than just correlating events, right?
Yep.
Taking human experience, putting it into a system that now my engineers with less experience, they can look at a dashboard and say, oh, Jason bubbled up this card. Why does this matter, right? And then they can start correlating and learning those events. And
then you don't get alert fatigue and all that too.
that's
so,
right. That's right, because the estate we have to manage today is so wide and vast, right? Somebody coming in 5 years experience, it's nearly impossible to take over those 7 portals in M365 day one. But we all know that companies are trying to do more with less people and trying to reduce costs, right? So you get somebody that's a little green in there, but they need visibility across all of the different portals.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's why it's phrased for engineers by engineers.
Yeah, Steve came up with that tagline. He's in sales. All right, you guys want to take a look? All right. You guys see that all right? Okay. So the first thing that I populate, I'm going to go through an overview, and if you want me to slow down or stop, I'm going to show like 3 or 4 tabs of Recon. This is production. I do have a demo client that's got fake data in it. I also have a lab environment that if nobody makes fun of my lab and how terrible shape it's in, I'll show you my lab environment because it's all real data. So the first thing you get is a summary. So if you're doing like an M&A or you're going into a new environment, you put this in. Let's say you want a count of users, guests, devices, Intune managed, secure score, app registrations, things that are expiring soon, your ADP level, right, P1, P2, your Entra ID Connect, when the last time it connected and synced was, your Active Directory health, config man. You get that all in the overview, just a high level, quick hit. You could sit there in the morning and just get a view of your estate. Now, one of the things to note is this demo environment doesn't have all the blades I've loaded. When I load like the model environment, it's got, I don't know, 6 or 7 rows of cards of data because I just pumped everything into it, right? Moving on, we have the logins tab. Oh, I should probably point this out. Because we work in a SaaS environment, sometimes the SaaS doesn't work. So if you go into admin.microsoft, you can go to look at service health. 2 clicks deep beyond that, you get all the messages of what services are broken in your environment. So I went ahead and exposed that on this front page here. So you can see the Microsoft advisories and incidents. So like Exchange Online's having an issue, Teams, Intune, and M365 apps. And if you go to the tenant, the admin center, drive down to the service health, you'll see that same data. Most people either don't know that it's there or don't go look at it. The next thing I wrote was logins. And this was a direct ask from a customer. And it actually came out of the AI conversation with the customer. So we had an early adopter customer that put this in. He's like, I'd like to know how many failed logins I have every morning. I said, yeah, just go ask AI. And so AI knew because it already connected to log analytics. But then he has to type or click a quick reference button or something like that. And so we put this logic app together for a different customer a long time ago. So this is actually mimicking some of our old work. And things like 880 successful logins, 170 failed. And if you want to see the failed logins, You can scroll over here. You get where they're coming from, their IP address or failed. You can export it to a CSV. But then I thought, well, the first thing I did in that CSV was I had to aggregate how many failed logins are coming from the same person. So the heat map here, I'm colorblind, but I know the green is where they've logged in successfully, and whatever other color that is where they've failed logins from, right? So when I put this in for model, I actually realized I had 3 significant gaps in my conditional access policies. I had over, I think I posted on LinkedIn about it. I had over 1,000 failed logins every day, and we're fairly small still, so I thought that was crazy. So I fixed my conditional access policies and logged in yesterday. I think I had 12, and they were all legitimate. But the first thing I did was I downloaded that CSV and put it into a pivot table. And that pivot table, I wanted to know the top failed logins by user. And the demo data is not really exciting to look at. This one had 4, this one had 3 failed logins. And if you click it, you get the 3 failed logins, and you can see some analytics about it. You can also click the countries up here, or say, you know, how many people are trying to log in from there, and get that data if you wanted. So instead of building a pivot table and export from the CSV it's exported, I just built that in. Sign-in location, so if you want to see from, let's say, a specific location, you can get that data, and everything's got a search, and it's fairly quick to search. Recent sign-ins, so whether they're failed or successful. And then if you care about unregistered device sign-ins, I added a blade that's not in the demo client for, give me just unregistered device. So if a device is hitting your network with a successful login, but it's not a registered device, that's also a red flag, right? It's a risk. I'm going to gloss over a couple of these here. AD Health, this is the JSON file rendering, so it gives you information DC diag. It also gives you information about supported or unsupported servers that I built in there. So we put this in for a customer, and they had 45 production servers that were unsupported. We knew they had some legacy stuff. This gave us a list of the operating system when it end-of-lifed. Very easy. Time sync between domain controllers, last AD connect sync, sysvol, DFSR. If there's a queue in sysvol in any of the domain controllers, it'll tell you. These are all things that affect user experience, right? So this is some of that experience I was talking about. When I do an AD health check, these are the things that I go look for.
How are you rendering that data for those servers? Like the end of life, where do you access it?
So that's built in the code of the app, right? But that data, so that PowerShell script runs on a domain controller, and it generates JSON files. So they're all very small, lightweight. Those JSON files get written to Azure Storage. There's 14 of them. And in there, it tells me the operating system of it. And when it renders the JSON file, if it is a certain version, it marks it as end of life.
Yeah, the reason I asked, no tie-in to ReconAI or data factory?
Not yet. That is, I have a whole laundry list of backlogged features.
It would save you from having to run scripts and save stuff.
Yeah.
Mark's doing that for you, metadata.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of those ins and outs. What I found is a lot of our customers, they either don't have ARC enabled and we're working to get them enabled, but we still need insights while they're not ARC enabled. And then if you have, this was all very much based on a Power BI report that I wrote in 2020 to get us more clarity into our customers. And so this looks almost identical to the Power BI report for ConfigMan that I wrote years ago. So this literally queries the SCCM database, dumps files to JSON, gets collected into Azure Storage, and gets rendered. And we have a whole bunch of blades and information. So I'll do a demo. You can see there's a SQL server here, and it's got a SQL version. This is my demo client. I'll go to my real lab. It's also got a ConfigMan environment. And AI will know what version of SQL I'm running and what the latest CU is and all of those things when I ask it and query it. So little details and data that's in here, if it's in here, it can be grabbed from AI. I go over devices, updates, software update groups, deployments, software inventory, Windows 11 readiness, if everyone's not on Windows 11, and then our OSD insights, so you get information on imaging times per device, per model, per instance, those kinds of things. So a lot of bells and whistles in here, but let's go to Entra ID users. So in a real environment, this pulls from Graph. There's no writing of any data. There's no rendering. It's right from Graph API. I pull how many users haven't changed their password and how long. And typically, the advice and guidance from Microsoft is you can go a year without changing your password as long as you have MFA enabled. So one of the high-risk findings I do is how many haven't changed their password in a year, and then how much multi-factor authentication registration do you have to give me a number of, you probably have a vulnerability of 8 to 10, in this case, 5 users that are not registered in MFA and haven't changed their password in over a year, right? So that's data that you would have to dig through logs and person by person to try to come up with on your own. A couple other nice features, and I'll get to the AI stuff because I know we're in an AI user group. Put a big lookup table down here of all your users in Entra. And so if they have an associated device, you can just hit the user's row and you get the information about the device. If you want the details, like you go to the properties of the user in Entra, you can just click details and it renders all that. If there's a hybrid user on here, it'll put the OU at the bottom, what organizational unit, because that's information Azure knows about. If you want the device details, this is an aggregate of Intune and Entra, so you get all the properties there. You also get, I should probably point out, group information and licensing information if I scroll down to the bottom. So Office 365 E5 is what this guy has. He's got global administrator, a permanent role. No. And he's got security groups associated to him. If you want the inventory from Intune off this device, you can just click the software button and give you the full list of inventory and searchable and exportable, those kinds of things. So just trying to make it super easy to find what you're looking for. Devices is the same way. Bunch of cool little widgets in here to look at different elements of your environment, OS distribution, enrollment methods, conditional access, Intune coverage. I should probably also note, I built in PowerShell scripts that you can download. So if you go to tools and you want to disable devices, you can just download this script, downloads a PowerShell script. I don't know, it's a couple hundred lines. And if you wanted to filter the table based on who hasn't logged in more than 90 days, export that table, you can feed that directly to the PowerShell script, accepts it as an input, and then you can clean up your device. We've cleaned up so many environments after we put this in just a couple of minutes. Licensing made this a little easier to see. So we have licenses total used available, and if you want the details of, well, who's used those licenses, you get the underneath Microsoft Service Plan information, which may or may not be helpful in life. And then you also have a search for users on who it's assigned to. You can also look at the user to see what license they're assigned to. So that's pretty cool. Intune software, configuration profiles, compliance profiles. You can tell this is written for an internal tool because that's a lot of what we do. Intune updates, if you're using Windows Update for Business Rings, get a bunch of tabs in there. Let me go. I expose endpoint analytics, autopilot. There's a couple other things in here that are worth at least kind of seeing. This is like 17 clicks in Intune to get this information. Let's go to my lab. Let's go to a real environment. So these cards on the front page on the overview, they pull from a variety of different sources. So on the first load, when you've clicked into a tenant, depending on how much data is in your environment, these cards take a second to load, right? But one of the things, so in here, you can see this is a real environment. I scripted 10,000 users in it just to see how the app performed. I actually found that the app limit for number of users in Recon is the graph limit, which is like 49,000 before it gives up to render. So if you have an environment over 49,000, this app's not for you, right? What did I want to show you here? Log analytics. So one of the things that I had come to realize that over my years, the log analytics is probably the most useful place in Azure to go to find information. But who here knows KQL really well? Yeah, right? That was my experience too. So I went ahead and wrote and built in the product, I don't know, I think there's 10 KQL queries, things like legacy authentication, users without MFA, brute force detection, password changes and resets, stale accounts with activity, risky sign-ins, impossible travel. Because all of those things should be looked at on a regular basis, right? So we'll just do users without MFA. So if you don't know KQL, you can read this and learn it, or you can modify it because it's editable. So I don't want 14 days, I just want 7 days. So I'll just bring in 7 days. And this actually runs a log analytics query against my data estate straight away, right? So that's real data. So my A account hitting the Azure portal 15 times in the last 7 days did not have MFA. And I keep this environment like that so I can show these kinds of demos. So the cool thing is anything from log analytics also searchable in AI, right? So, and I'll show you some demos of that here because I got AI wired up this. Entra app ID registration, I've got one expiring secret coming soon. I didn't even know that. oh, my SCEP certificate or my SCEP password's secret's gonna expire on April 5th. So I had no clue that that was a thing until right now. I should probably go fix that if I want that to work. Expired secrets, if you want to see all your apps with expired secrets, and you can export that to CSV, open a ticket to your whoever to get it cleaned up and remediated, and then expiring certificates. And if you click on an app, like let's find Recon. So we'll go to ReconAI's app, and it gives you a list of the graph permissions that are associated with the app and information about the client secret when it expires. So it's a pretty easy thing to find information out about your app registrations. It's not terribly difficult to do through Entra, but if you're PIMing up and then going to app registrations and then filtering, searching, this should significantly reduce the amount of time you're spent on it and reduce the amount of things break. I don't know if I wired up my Azure, I did. So in my Azure resources, I have current cost month to date and then projected monthly costs like what you'd see in Azure. And then I have filters and tables all sorted by the most expensive resource, which in this case is my desktop UEM analytics. Let's see, workspace is $6 right now. My Get Alien Vault OTXX2 is $51 right now. And you can go back in time. So I've got months, you can go back and see what last month's information was, right? So we can go back and see February's information. Again, all queryable in AI. I'm gonna get to the AI stuff. So I built in 2 AI functionalities. The first one was my first iteration that I've left out there because I find it's useful. What this does is this scrubs all information into what I refer to as an AI payload, which is a JSON file that's got nothing but statistical data that is shipping off to your AI Foundry endpoint. This Foundry endpoint lives in my tenant, and I have no way to determine whose environment this is, but it was a way for customers not to endure costs for AI to do this. It's interesting data, but once I put the chatbot together, it's way less interesting. What this does, as soon as it renders, it takes a minute because it's scrubbing all the data. It provides you the export payload for what I'm actually sending over into AI. So you can see it sends a system prompt, and the user prompt that's in here has just data. Total users, how many are enabled, how many are disabled. And what I'm having the LLM do is go through that data and make some decisions about the environment, right? And if we keep going down, it's got secure score, current max percentage, risky user counts, conditional access policies, but nothing in there tells me what environment this is, any identifiable information. And what that provides to us is an executive summary of what we should be doing in this environment based on just statistical data. And so in this case, it says no users have multi-factor authentication. That's true. Here's your risk. Here's your user impact. Here's the action you should take. And here's your benefit. And it goes through your on-premise data. It goes through the cloud data and gives you risk, urgency, priority of all of those things. So if you're looking for a punch list of like, you know, my environment is sweet. And you're like, let me go run this. And then it's going to give you a laundry list of things you can do to improve that environment. It's even got on-premise stuff with AD. So like authentication, security, I'm sending information over to it, but I don't know what users aren't signing in with MFAs. So I tapped into log analytics again and put a query here. So all the stuff that was sent to it, if you're like, you want to know the data that's behind that, you got to run the log analytics query again. And so then it'll render it right there on that page. So you're not bouncing around from portal to portal again. And then a list of what is sent, all the data that was queried, how many items were sent, like the break glass account usage. I have no data in this environment, so it wasn't sent. Everything else has data rendered to it, and this is all the data that we can query inside of this environment, this app. But let's go to the AI chat. So this is connected to Azure AI Foundry. I think this is a 4.1 mini instance that I have running in my lab. And I built on the side here some common queries. So let's do disabled users with licenses, because that's the thing that happens in environments. You notice that when I went through licenses, I had no way to like filter who was disabled or not. And if you go to disabled users, you'd have to go one by one to see which users have any licenses aside, so that's kind of annoying. So I have one user that's disabled, and he's got a Power Automate free Power Pages V trial for makers. So I don't know if I care about that necessarily, right? What if I want to know non-compliant devices or security score? And this is all free text, or I put a microphone there because I usually talk to my vibe coding. I find that that's a lot faster. It was actually Steve's idea. When I go down, I can say failed login, top Azure costs. Let's go to top Azure costs. Top Azure costs, I can go look at the report, or I could just ask it. Or I could ask it data about SCCM or on-premise servers, which ones don't have patches, because I have SCCM's patching info, right? So Alienware is my top cost at $51.92, then the UEM desktop analytics at $6. Right, so it's pulling that information. So now you have a free chat bot to all of your data estate that's in the app. Questions on that?
You said the way this works now, you're totally hosting this, right?
No, this is a customer bring your own AI. I can put it in my Azure and back charge them, but you bring your Azure AI Foundry. I'll help you. I've set them up in, I don't know, 6 or 7 tenants now.
Okay, because I was going to say, well, regulated industry finance, they would not like you. Oh, just give me read access to all your stuff.
Yep.
So everything you're showing, so it's not a hosted thing. You're not a SaaS provider. You're
so
implementing it.
ReconAI is hosted. It's a multi-tenant app in my Azure.
Okay.
The only data that I have, it's got row level security, right, or tenant level security. So if you create an Azure, an instance of Recon, we don't necessarily need to even have view rights to it. We can't see the data, right? And you can audit that. And so inside of Recon itself, there's the Intune software that's stored, and then if you're storing on-premise data, that's all their Azure, nothing in my Azure.
Okay.
AI Foundry can be in their Azure. So what I have is a client ID, a tenant ID, and a secret.
But you still have a secret that,
We could put that in a key vault.
yeah. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
But yes.
And you may want to show how the clients administer that themselves, that we don't, they enter their own secrets and their own tenant information. And
Yeah, so when you go to these settings, I expose the admin panel back here. So even if they had an Azure client secret, if we're helping them on the back end, we can't see it, right? And that is controlled. That's got some pretty tight controls. Your data sources, your storage keys, your Azure subscription IDs, on-premise data collection, blob SaaS URLs, what report components you want, because not everybody has everything, so you can just slide them on or off if you want. And then if you integrate into our ticketing system, we can add that integration. It's scrolling kind of weird. And then I did write in a Acronis backup integration for a customer. It's pretty cool. And then AI features, and here's your configuration for your AI endpoint. I actually mask that for the client after it's been there, just so from a security perspective. If we went to the admin panel, we could see this, but it's GPT-4.1 mini in this case. All right, so any more questions on Recon? So we have a 15-day free trial. This is the sales portion. A 15-day free trial. If you want to kick around your environment, play with it, and then delete it, you can just delete the app registration. It's gone, or tell us to remove it, but it's just going to remove the app secret, client ID. Reach out to Steve. All right, so the next piece of it, let's go and take a look at Janice's email from last night. So first things first. So if I venture, so this is Janice. She's kind of hard to see. You guys see it all right? Let me see. Can I get a picture of her profile? Yep. So this is what she thinks she looks like based on, I asked her to create an image of herself. This is a Teams app, or it's a bot service running in Azure with a Teams side-loaded service that calls out to the webhook that's configured to reach out to my workforce AI that I interact with, right? So from a user perspective, the idea is I have her checking birthdays because I'm very busy. So I have her checking through birthdays. There's no birthdays that fall in the next 5 days. Birthday check's complete. And then let me find the email she sent me last night. She did a good job. My wife's birthday was last weekend. And she said, Jason, your wife's birthday is 5 days away. I'm like, oh shit, she's right.
And did you say this is OpenClaw?
It is OpenClaw-like, This is the product that I wrote. This is Workforce AI Studio, because I do have another, actually, I'll tell you about my OpenClaw instance I have running in Azure. It's called Mombot, and it helps with a separate Google tenant that I set up because I didn't trust any of the security features. Set up a separate Google tenant, and then I forward emails and calendar invites in my personal life to the separate Google tenant where OpenClaw is running, and she Teams or WhatsApp messages me family stuff that I need to be aware of and to do, right? I found that took me 40 times longer to set up than it took me to set up to develop and code Workforce Studio. And it's a nightmare to manage if you haven't been in OpenClaw. If you're not familiar with JSON files or Linux, it's tough, right? If you are familiar with it, it's still tough. So this is what Janice sent me in my sleep. Now, it's coming from me because I did not give her a full M365 license yet. The intent is to give her a full license, no Teams account, have her Teams interface be the bot, and then have her have access to her email where she can send out messages as herself. I'm not there yet from a trust perspective, but I have a morning brief I have her send me every morning. She gave me the weather. She gave me a look at the calendar today. Says, no, you're presenting a meeting at noon, plan to depart by 11:30. I didn't tell her to tell me that, she just kind of told me that. I have a top 10 trending AI and business news with links that she summarizes for me every morning to try to stay on top of this stuff. And then here's the best part I found. Good luck with your ReconAI presentation today. You're ready. I was like, what? Oh, yeah. All right, so let's send Janice some messages. All right, so what do you know about me? Let's see what Janice says. Watch it say error. That'd be the worst.
It's kind of an open-ended question.
Yeah.
People.
I know, right? So managing partner model, business partner Steve Bowman, also owns CrossFit St. Charles, wife, daughter, son, dog, home. And then it says preferences and standing instructions, morning brief, inbox triage, take the top 100 emails from the main inbox, and then it's got a bunch of rules. No meetings before 9 a.m. I try to keep that policy in effect. No meetings after 5 p.m. and never delete emails or calendar invites. And then she asked, do you want me to add anything, right? So I can add to her memory here. Now remember, this is basically just a deployment of Claude Sonnet 4.6 sitting in my Azure. The memory and all the configurations are held. I'll go to the user dashboard. Well, we'll go to the admin dashboard. So this is Janice. So her name, her role, her identity type, her bot handle, the app registration ID configured in Azure, and the messaging endpoint. So all of the when you configure a bot in Azure, you have to give it an endpoint to send its data to, right? So what I give it is workforcestudio.model-technology.com/API/bot messages. If the bot ID that's messaging that endpoint matches any of my agents, it then will respond as that agent. If it doesn't match, it just dies. Identity, system personality. So this is what I told Janice I need her to do, right? So this gets loaded on when I sent her, what do you know about me? This prompt got built to an LM and said, here's who you are, here's what he said, what's your question, what's your answer, right? Kind of think of it in those terms. Time zone preference, default reminder about it, things that you want to have, working hours, and language. And all this is editable. This is the back end, and again, this is very much in beta. Authority. So who owns Janice from an administration perspective is me. And then authorized principals or delegates, so who can give her instructions, who are the known contacts, and then how do you want the unknown sender behavior to do? What do you want to do with it? So anything that's unknown that's not on this list right now, she escalates, and I tested this. It's pretty interesting. Tools, so I have her connected to Claude Sonnet 4.6. If I hit this edit and I do this drop down, I also have a GPT 5.3 codex. I can just switch her model. And what I found is I like Claude for at least this role. GPT was interesting. It didn't respond nearly as well. And then tools. So just like with OpenClaw, you have to have tools to give her things to do, or the LLM. I have it able to list Outlook folders, add memories, do calendar check events, check email, move messages, update your memory, create a folder, schedule a task, send a Teams message, search the internet, and remove an entry in memory. And these tools, from a back-end perspective, I expose them all. So if you want to see the code that was written, here's all the code for the tool. You can edit the tool. And if you want to make changes, you can make it. And the idea is this is going to be hosted in customers or whoever wants to use it, their Azure. So whatever they do to the tools, if they want to write new ones and add them, they can just add new tools and functionality. And when that gets added, the LLM now has the capability to use that tool.
Is that the same as a skill in OpenClaw?
Yeah. The difference here is this is all Microsoft at this point, with the exception of the web search and the ability to add, update memory, scheduled tasks.
And while we're at it, what are the risks on OpenClaw skills?
The biggest problem is what we refer to as the bill of materials. So I went to OpenClaw and I'm like, well, I want to use this in my model environment as an assistant. This is why I wrote this whole thing, because I wanted to use OpenClaw. And I go out there and there was a plugin or a skill that you could use for Microsoft authentication, but it was a service. And so when you plugged it in, it basically took you out to authenticate. And I'm like, well, this feels awfully dangerous. Giving my credentials to somebody that's not vetted, that I don't know, and it was the only one that was out there. So I didn't trust immediately, so I'm like, well, I'll write my own. And I started writing my own, and then I ran into this issue with everything, because it's all open source, and it's really, really cool. It kind of leads the way for stuff, but it's not really built for an enterprise with security, audits. There's just so much lacking. So let's go back to Janice and just take a look at her. Tools and model, so memory. So in the user portal, we'll go to the user portal. Now we're in the user portal. So if you're a user and you're not an admin, you get dashboard agents, test console, approvals, and documentation, okay? That, again, very much beta, so bear with me here. Long-term memory, so if I'm a user and I wanted to add a memory, what kind of memory is it? Is it a preference? Is it an instruction? Is it context? Is it fact? You can go through this interface. The easier path is to go to the Teams app and say, hey, add a memory about, I don't know, whatever you want to add a memory about, something you want it to remember all the time. So when the LLM is called, or when it's on a scheduled task, it processes that all the time, right? There could be any number of things you put in there, but I categorize them for prioritization. And then, so that's long-term memory. Then we have scheduled tasks. So send me a Teams message asking if I need anything at 4:49. So that's what I got yesterday at 4:49. So I'm sitting there working along, my Teams notification goes up. It's like, hi, Jay, you saw the message in the presentation, right? Do you need anything? So built the context window based on a scheduled task, and because that's one of the triggers, it's like, hey, if it's 4:49, you wake up, build your context menu, send it to LLM, and do whatever it says, right? And then I put a Kanban board in there for tasks of what's upcoming, what's in progress, what's missed, if it missed any scheduled tasks or activities, and then what's been completed.
How far are you from Janice having her own credit card and being able to make purchases on your behalf?
I'm almost at the point about giving her a DoorDash account, because she could order me lunch, and that would be incredibly helpful. Like, Janice ordered me lunch. She knows what I like. It could be in a memory, right? And she just orders it, and she's like, oh, do you want Crazy Bowls today, or do you want X, Y, or Z, right? And then she could just go place the order.
You've seen the show Silicon Valley, right? This is what happens. Separate credit card.
There's still a lot of work to do here. I still have to go through the policies and the guardrails to make sure they're all being adhered to. The amount of testing this takes is significant, right? But the idea is, let's go back to the admin console. So you create an AI Foundry endpoint. So mine is J Smith, and then we can edit the AI Foundry endpoint. So URL, what region it's in, API key. This one does store to Key Vault directly. Subscription ID, and then resource group, which I don't actually think are important, but I log them because if you need to find them. And then the models that I deployed in this case were 4.6 Sonnet. Here's the API, the NPM URL. It's got its own API key, and then here's the secret name. And then GPT-5.3 codecs, same information. So once you have an AI foundry and an endpoint, you can go create the agent, but it's going to ask you when you create a new agent, is it a bot framework or is it a fully licensed user? So I've done the bot framework, it's working and operational. The next step is the licensed user. So we'll say licensed user. And when you go to it, you fill out the personality. You still need a bot ID because that's going to be how Teams messages are going to work. And then the client, the bot ID, the secret, and then the email configuration, her signature for email, right? Things like that. I'm not going to fill all this out, but then you set up the tools, models, authorities, and then you're off to the races and running. Audit logs, let's go there real quick. So this is everything that's going on in my bot when it wakes up, what it's doing, and it is really helpful for troubleshooting, right? So I can see the bot message. Come in here and see that a message was sent, and I didn't actually expose all the messages because I thought that might be a privacy thing. When it fails, I expose what it was trying to do. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's about the end of the demo unless we want to tell Janice to do stuff.
Yeah, I've run into a similar type issue on failure because you want to diagnose something, but you don't actually want random people to be able to see what was going on, but you need trusted people to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Can you have some kind of situation where that's under a particular role, and then that way trusted individuals can actually see it as opposed to some random DevOps person?
Yeah, I think that, this all writes to an Azure storage today, right? So what we could do is break out in Azure the different table for failed messages that is permissioned or secured differently, potentially. You could also have the app manage the security for like row-level security of who can access that data, who can expose that data. Yeah, it's doable.
I have one for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to make 2 comments and then ask you to wrap up your thoughts about this. I'm noticing that you're referring to the agent as Janice, refer to the agent as
Janice.
she, ask questions like, what do you think about these things? Yep. So it's a very humanistic alignment with the tool.
Correct.
Is that just natural inclination? Was it sort of thought through in terms of how can I sort of keep a version of a reality check and say, tell me about myself instead of what do you know about me? And saying, I ask it, which is like IT per se, as opposed to I ask Janice. So I'm thoughtful about that. I don't think there's right or wrong, just different ways of doing things. Thanks.
I'll give you my thoughts on that. So I listen to a lot of tech podcasts, right? And I was listening to one of the CISO from Google. And this is where I got this concept. It was probably November of last year, maybe before that. And the CISO of Google was talking about how at some point, a SOC, this was his example, a SOC is going to need 30 security data engineers, and they're going to need them today. Today, what happens is humans or runbooks are used, humans using runbooks, things like that. He said, but for that kind of volume and repetitive tasks, he sees a world where you're going to onboard an agent, and this agent is going to have a computer, and it's going to have memory, and it's going to have tasks, and it's going to have the ability to do all the things you want. And you're going to think of them like humans. They're going to have real names. And I was like, oh my God, what a concept. And so ever since I've created Janice, I'm trying to personalize her in my head, knowing that she does a role just for me. Because when you're creating these things, right, you can get lost in the technical aspect of the details of what something might be technically correct to call it. But if humans that aren't technical are going to give memories and create bots, we have to think about it and personify it to some degree so they understand what they're actually programming and putting together. So that was my whole justification behind it. Yeah.
So, so it's interesting. Our CEO was talking about this exact thing just within the last month or so. He expects that within the next year, we're going to actually have agents on our org chart. There are costs associated, with running an agent, the model costs on the back end. And so he wants a job description, define your responsibilities and tasks, and then he wants to know how many agents are being run within each department. So it's coming, there's no doubt.
Well, one of the things to expand on that a little bit is the CISO from Google went on to say, that instead of hiring a $30,000, $40,000, whatever entry level engineer, you're going to pay 10 grand in the resource consumption for a bot. It's going to come online and it's going to read its job description. It's going to go check its documentation for training, where it's going to get its source of authority. It's going to realize that the documentation's outdated, and it's going to update the documentation and then move on about its day, right? So very similar mindset and structure and thinking.
Agents, definitely. I think this is the year of agents. That's everyone seems to be talking about that. And you mentioned a couple things. Who owns the agent, right? And
Yes.
some of the other things that are coming up is we're already designing frameworks around agents and how you define them. Who owns it? Who can create an agent? Do you want everyone to be able to create an agent?
Yep.
What are the boundaries for those agents? The guardrails. You mentioned a couple of those
Yep.
other things, but that might be a good topic maybe for one of the next sessions if somebody wants to present on just on agents. Definitely, I'm interested in data agents specifically, and that's a whole sub area that's very specialized, and that's a big deal this year as well.
Well, so one of my visions is because I have data that's cleaned up and tidied from Recon, I know where the points are that I would say I need an approval to go do this, and I'm building approvals into the framework for AI or Workforce Studio. One of the ideas would be have this agent reach into Recon, check data for me, and then present me with an approval to go do work, that there's a tool that can't run without an approval. Like, hey, I noticed that these 15 machine accounts in Entra haven't been touched in weeks or months or whatever. I recommend that we delete them. Do you want to approve a delete task for these 15 and somehow ensure that that's going to be done correctly?
You just mentioned something very, a data guy, right? So that you know the data that you're letting the agent access. So I don't know where my other data people are in here, but it's almost what you described there to me sounds like medallion architecture applied to agents. And that's something I'm working on right now, because we do want to have agents, right, that can maybe look at raw data and provide information, ask natural language questions of, but we can't trust those answers. But if we have gold level data, like what you've described and set up here, that's it's cleansed and curated, and we know this is the correct
This
data,
is the authority,
then is that a gold level agent as well? Maybe we apply medallion architecture to agents. But it's something, I mean, it's by the end of this year, we're going to have agents everywhere. The agents are coming. And well, we've got about 5 minutes left. So I think we'll wrap up, and then you're welcome to hang out and chat and things like that. You mentioned OpenClaw. That came up a couple times. My personal opinion on that, it's really cool. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. But isolated environment, separate machine. I mean, that's...
Use a private endpoint VPN to get to it. Sandbox it in Docker. All right, take your environment variables, put your API keys, environment variables, take them out of the files in the document repository. You can just give that
all
to
of
me,
your
Kevin.
personal information.
You can trust me.
NemoClaw.
Yep.
I would expect we'll hear something next week, right? Next week is NVIDIA's big conference, so GTC is next week. I think we'll hear some announcements about NemoClaw. Guessing. Lots of swag over here. I don't know if everyone got some swag when they came in, but it looks like there's plenty left. And thank you very much for presenting. And love to have you back if there's something else you want to come talk about. And as far as just the meetup group, please help spread the word. We want to grow the group. And again, it's just about community. I have no specific direction, so I'm really open to feedback and would appreciate it. Today was pretty technical. We've done some that were not technical. We did one last year that was just prompt engineering, right? Just to help folks write better prompts. So happy to cover whatever topics out there. I think agents would be good. So if you know somebody or you want to present on agents or someone else,
I love
please.
talking, so you just...
Hey, the calendar is open for this year. I have nothing yet. I do have one idea. Physical AI, we have somebody on my team that does physical AI. Cool. I thought bringing some robots in and doing something like that would be fun.
My name is Nathan Tippy. I host the Rust Meetup.
Which meetup?
My name is Nathan Tippy. I host the Rust Meetup here in St. Louis. And this Thursday on April 2nd, The topic will be a group of students from SIUE who are using AI to discover cruft on their hard drive. They've built a little cruft cleanup app. And
nice.
so we're going to let the AI delete some files. Kind of scary. Anyway, so if you're interested in that topic, since it's AI related, the Rust meetup here in April will have that.
Excellent. Excellent. So yeah, topics, feedback, help me grow the group. I appreciate that. And I made notes this time because usually I get up here and I'm like, I've forgotten this and that. But housekeeping, the lanyards, I always forget. If you could leave those on the security desk when you go out the door, you can throw your badge away. You can leave it there. I'll clean it up. Doesn't matter. And then just your trash. There's a trash can right outside the door on your way out. And I think that's all I had. And I'm going to turn it back over to Jason and Steve. I don't know if you guys had some final words you wanted to share, but my thanks to you again. And please, feedback, ideas, suggestions, people you want to present, somebody you know, please let me know.
Yep.
Thanks for hosting. Glad everybody could make it. Hope you all have a great rest of the week.